Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Gist with Joe. Today I'm here with C.R. Wiley. C.R. Wiley is a pastor, writer, professor, and podcaster currently residing in Washington State. He has written for Touchstone Magazine, Modern Reformation, Sacred Architecture, The Imaginative Conservative, Front Porch Republic, the National Review Online, and First Things, among others. His most recent book is In the House of Tom Bombadil, which was published in 2021. He is also the author of The Household and the War for the Cosmos, published by Canon Press in 2019. His short fiction has appeared in The Mythic Circle and elsewhere. And the first book in his young adult fantasy series, The Purloined Boy, was published by Cannonball Books in 2017. He is a board member of the Academy of Philosophy and Letters, as well as New St. Andrews College. Chris, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, glad to, Joe. Good to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you and great to have you on. So, Chris, the first thing that I want to ask is I need you to settle the debate. My friends and I have two really good friends who I play this game with. It's called Lord of the Rings Journeys into Middle-earth. Okay. And so one thing that we have been bickering about, and these two guys are also pretty adamant fans of Lord of the Rings. And we always had this discussion over the figure Tom Bombadil, and I know you know Tom Bombadil well. The question is, and the debate that we're having is this: who is the most powerful creature in Middle-earth? Is it Tom Bombadil? Is it someone else? I'm on the side that it is Tom Bombadil. My friends in that circle and even outside that circle say differently. I'm curious, as someone who has written a book on Tom Bombadil, as someone who has immersed themselves in the Tolkien universe, well, I'm sure, what would you have to say?
Wow, that is a question that I address a little bit, but you can't make I think a conclusive argument, because when you're dealing with Tolkien people, you got different types.
Sure.
Some of them are like the fundamentalists of Tolkien. And if it's not like explicitly written in the legendarium somewhere, then you're not allowed to say anything. It's like if it's like chapter and verse, that's just it. And there's no place where Tolkien says Tom is the most powerful creature in Middle-earth.
That's right.
Now, there in the story, there is that debate at the Council of Elrond about whether or not they can trust him with the ring and all that kind of stuff. And
he's he's too lazy. Yeah.
And then there's this sort of thing. Well, even if everybody else is defeated, Sauron will eventually wear even Tom down. That there's that state. But that's not like the authoritative word. That's just the opinion of somebody at the council.
Sure.
So it's pretty clear that Tom is unaffected by the ring. We've got evidence of that. He can even make fun of it. That whole episode when he puts it up to his eye.
Yeah,
I think he's making fun of Sauron at that moment. The eye of Sauron, and then he flips it in the air and he makes it disappear.
Right.
And then he pulls it out like he's like performing a magic trick for his nephews. Here you go.
Right.
He's completely unimpressed, puts it on his finger, he doesn't disappear, he laughs, all that kind of stuff. So I think if he's not more powerful than Sauron, he's a pretty good match.
Yeah.
That's about as far as I can go with it with that fundamentalist crowd.
So we won't talk about this for too long. One of my friends says that it's Gladriel. I don't know what any comments.
Oh no, she's not even close. She's not even close.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I know
she's impressive. She's impressive. Don't get me wrong, but she's not even close.
Do you have a quick rationale for why?
Well, she's intimidated by the ring. She knows that if she were to put it on, she'd be completely corrupted.
There it is. I'll make sure that I send this to them very quickly after this is recorded. No, I do appreciate that, and we'll get back. I'm sure we'll get back to some Bombadil talk in just a little bit. The main reason why I have people come on is I have interesting thinkers in the fields of psychology, theology, and philosophy come on to explain the gist of their intellectual project. And so to start this conversation, Chris, I just really want to know, well, what's the answer to that exact question? What is your intellectual project? Where is it going? Do you have any goals with it currently?
Yeah, that's a great question and a huge one.
Yeah.
So my larger project, I would say, has to do with the retrieval and development of Christian culture.
Mm. No, just really like that takes a couple of days, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. It more or less swallowed up my life.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, I look at the current situation we face in Western civilization as a kind of parallel to what we saw with the Arian crisis in the early church. The Arians had run had sort of run the gamut. They had taken over the major institutions. They were running the show.
Sure.
And orthodoxy was in, sort of like retreat, even hiding. When you think about Athanasius and so forth, he was like exiled, what is it, like 6, 7 times, There are all these great stories about him on the run. Like there's this one story where he's on the run, he's in a boat, right, with a couple of guys who are trying to, sneak him away. And the authorities are coming at, in a different boat, and they're passing him, and he's got his, hood over his head so they can't recognize him. And they ask, have you seen Athanasius? And he says, he's very near. And they just keep going. But anyway, he was cool head, that dude. But I think that's kind of where we are. I think the West got off the rails kind of during the nominalist realist controversy, but it really took a deep dive with the French Revolution and the philosophes and all that kind of stuff. And so now atheism is a Christian heresy. I don't know if people really fully appreciate the significance of that. Like there's the old joke, Jean-Paul Sartre is the greatest atheist Christianity has ever produced. It's like, so what God don't you believe in? You don't believe in the Christian God. In other words, Christianity has established all the parameters.
Yes.
Even your understanding of justice and concern for the oppressed. Where do you think you got that, bozo? It's from us.
Exactly.
So
yes, I mean that is so true. Just real quick, I mean, I always tell. Well, that's one thing I try to tell my friends a lot is that, listen, the way that you even think about, even like how you think about consciousness, how you think about reality, how you just this like meta notion of thought, right? This metacognition is all due to, it's just all under a Christian framework. Whether you want to deny it or whether you accept it or not, it's under a Christian framework. And exactly, modern atheism today, Western atheism, yeah, I mean, it's responding to, I'm not going to believe in God. And when you say that, you have to realize that in that assertion that you are referring to a specific notion of God, and that specific notion of God is a Christian God. And then, yeah, I mean, and you explained that well. But yeah, sorry, I just wanted to side note.
No, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that, so the challenge for us is in the West, it's not so much that we're up against a completely alien force. We're actually up against sort of an illegitimate child. So what we're dealing with then is something that has a very kind of sort of intuitive knowledge of the faith at the highest levels, but at the same time is kind of stupid in certain respects. It just, there's some of the things that the new atheists say, or even, world-class intellectuals say about the past are just manifestly untrue, and it doesn't take a whole lot of work to see that they're not true if you're willing to do the work of looking into things for yourself. But anyway, that's what we're dealing with. So consequently, it's a bigger challenge, a tougher challenge, but I think we're going to come through it. I mean, we're already seeing the fruit, the really unsavory fruit of this sort of Christian heresy all over the place. And it's, I think, going to get worse for the foreseeable future. And there's going to be another side to that. In other words, things don't just kind of go down forever. At some point, people say, this is not working. Now, nobody who's alive today will probably say that, because I think we've got a lot of sort of buffer or a cushion. In other words, it's like how long does it take for you to crash as a junkie when you got $1 million in the bank? It takes a while. You know, when you got $20, it's not very long. So Western civilization still has a lot going for it. So it's going to take a while. I think generations before this all plays out. But I don't have even the slightest doubt that we're on the winning side.
Well, that's good. I mean, well, I'm happy that you say that. Yeah, I think back to this idea of the quip, God is dead. Obviously, that was proclaimed by Nietzsche. And one way of thinking about that is God has been blown up, right? So God's now in like hundreds of millions of tiny little pieces. And we're in this stage right now in Western civilization where we're trying to collectively pick up these pieces. And sometimes we pick up a piece and it's in a story. And sometimes we pick up a piece and it's in a friendship, right? Or this feeling that you have during a good conversation. Sometimes you pick up a piece and it's listening to maybe a song or, all these little pieces. Or maybe sometimes it's, you find a piece and it's a different expression of religiosity. I talked yesterday about, with Cal Zeldin, I talked about how I think that this is actually probably one of the most, I think this is, people say that, oh, religion is dying. Well, no, I think this is actually a moment in history where we're seeing a huge religious uptick, right? Religiosity is huge right now. And so you're picking up this piece and you want to attach yourself to something greater and you want to attach yourself to something bigger. And maybe it's new age occultism. Maybe it's a political party, whether that's, on the left or on the right? Maybe it's Trumpism. Maybe it's a conspiracy theory, right? Conspiratorial thought. And so I talked to you about this just a little bit before. I don't think we weren't recording yet, but again, it's this, I don't think that people are doing these things in bad faith. I think that when you're in it, obviously it begins to corrode your spirit, but I don't necessarily think that people enter into these things in bad faith. I think that it's a miscalculated way of trying to express, or you witness that little fragmented piece of God that has been blown up in Western civilization. And I appreciate that you say, well, we're trying to come together and put up the pieces. And although it might take some time, you ultimately think, yeah, we're on the winning side. And hopefully we remember God in his proper form.
Yeah. I like the way you put it in terms of blow up and getting little pieces here and there. And I think that's a great way to think about it. And I think you're right. I think we see globally a huge surge of interest in religious, what would be termed religious concerns, matters. It reminds me of G.K. Chesterton's quip that when people stop believing in God, it's not they believe in nothing, it's they believe in anything.
Yes.
People are desperately, looking and feeling around. I'm also reminded of, the Apostle Paul at Mars Hill in the Areopagus when he's talking to these Stoic and Epicurean philosophers in Acts chapter 17, and he says, and he actually quotes a Stoic, and he says, that what has occurred is there are these times of ignorance, but God has permitted them to occur so that people could kind of grope their way along and perhaps find something, find God in that way. And that's kind of what we're experiencing right now. I think there's always been, we live in a world that is at war with the truth, and it's been that way for a long, long time, not just in our time. And consequently, I think things ebb and flow. There are better times and worse times. I actually think that we're in a time right now that someday, 1,000 years from now, people are going to be saying, man, those were the great days.
Sure.
Those were the days when,
yeah,
that's right. When people really had to, fight against, these philosophies or these spiritual forces of wickedness. And I don't want to get sounding strange when I talk in those terms, but
no, it's fine. I had a conversation yesterday and we got a little strange in that regard. We started talking about the actual manifestation of evil for a little bit. It makes people uncomfortable, but so don't worry.
Oh yeah. No, it's, and then people think that it's sort of like irreconcilable with a high-tech scientific worldview, but it's not. I mean, I think that I was listening to Paul Kingsnorth here not too long ago. He's
Yeah.
a guy out of the UK, and he was talking about AI and just the he raised the prospect that perhaps, when we talk about demonic possession uh, in Scripture, you see that there has to be some kind of medium through which the spirit expresses itself, and principally it's human beings.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he entertained the idea, what if AI is a kind of vehicle through which the demonic can express itself? And I was like, whoa, man, this is taking us in a direction.
Well, hey, I mean, if it apparently has sentience, right? I mean, it very well could. We were talking yesterday. This is great. Yesterday, part of our conversation was discussing and trying to reconcile and trying to bridge this notion of the meaning crisis. And the meaning crisis is, Cal did a great job explaining what that is, but it's also this idea of this moment in time that we're in and that we have been in, that's very eloquently discussed by the philosopher and cognitive scientist John Vervaeke, if you know who that is at all.
Yeah.
I think that you would really enjoy his work. Yeah, John Vervaeke, he's a professor at the University of Toronto. And I mean, you obviously can intuit what the meaning crisis is, because in a way you just explained it, right? And so Hale Zeldin and I were discussing, how do you reconcile the meaning crisis that we're facing today? Precisely, like I said, exactly what you were just discussing, with actual demonic possession. Because some people would make a very comfortable claim that, yes, there is a meaning crisis today in the world, and there has been. And yes, we have a very insecure and very unstable way of structuring our lives. Yesterday, we discussed how, I'm using my pen because I'm going to use it as an example. We talked about the cosmological structure of reality, and that you need a top, right? And you see these patterns come into even our very speech, like as in, I look up to my father, when me and my father are the same height, right?
He may even be shorter.
Yeah, right, exactly. He can be shorter. Exactly. So I look up to my father. Well, don't just take that for granted. I think we discussed this off the air. You're taking things too seriously. Well, you're not thinking about it enough. You're not taking it as serious as it should be. So even in our language, these patterns emerge. I look up to my father. Again, as you said, he could be shorter to me, but then there's a significance of up, right? And it suggests the cosmological structure of reality that we ultimately need to have, and that things can help us get there, right? But we can't just stop. I talked about it like rungs, right? Where, a great poet, I'm a big fan of Dante. People who have watched, I think I've said this thousands of times now, I named my son Dante after Dante.
Cool.
But so, Dante can help you get to one platform, right? And even like the secular people, maybe the secular authors or the secular thinkers could also help you. But ultimately, right, there's a top, and that's God and the greatest good, right? And so, yeah, when you don't have that greatest good, it gets really sticky. And going back to the demonic possession, because that's where I was really going. Yeah, I mean, you also have to acknowledge, though, that there's, in the cosmological structure, there's also an underneath, right? And so how can you, there's a very real possibility that these are connected, and people are very comfortable with saying that there is a meaning crisis. We don't know how to order our reality, and we've lost a lot of things. Okay, a lot of conservatives would even say that, but those same people are uncomfortable with saying, but there might be a metaphysical and a spiritual side to this that could be the manifestation of real malleable evil, in the way of, well, demons. And people, demons. Well, don't think of it like, the exorcism of Emily Rose, though. Think of it as like a spirit that's possessing you. Yesterday, our conversation, Kale discussed, when you go on a diving board, you go, whoa, but that spirit possesses you, that courageous spirit possesses you to take a jump off. And so we have to be more serious thinkers and be more nuanced in this idea of possession. And I'm having an exorcist come on the show
Oh,
after
nice.
the new
Great.
year. His name's Father Vincent Lampart. He's a pretty well-known exorcist in the United States, and we're going to try. I'm going to have a conversation with him about that and see where that goes. But
Yeah, this is a particularly interesting line of thought for me right now. I'm working on a book on totalitarianism. And what you see with totalitarians is that they equate knowledge with power. That's Francis Bacon, of course, but we all know that knowledge is more than power. But they reduce it to that, which means that essentially the test for any statement in terms of its truth is whether or not it gives you more power.
sure.
So that's how they operate. So what do they want power over? Well, they want power over everything. They want power over the material world. But they also want power over the social world. They want to have this sort of monopoly of power to fashion a world that ideologically kind of makes sense to them. But what they fail to acknowledge is the real presence. And when I get to that, normally we think about, when we use the term real presence within Christian circles, we know we're talking about the sacrament, and we're talking about whether or not there's, the actual presence of Christ being communicated to us through the Eucharist or baptism or whatever. So, but we're at a point now where we're so mechanistic in our thinking. The cosmos has become completely flat. And it's just power dynamics everywhere. It's just collisions, not only in outer space, but even in social space. And everybody wants to become the center of the universe. And so, everybody wants to get larger and larger and exercise more and more control over the people around them. So it's this weird zero-sum Hobbesian game that we're all in. But what it all denies is the real presence. So there's a real presence in you. You're not a machine. You're not just simply a stimulus response mechanism.
Yeah.
No matter what Daniel Dennett says,
Yeah, right.
And neither am I. There's real presence here, there's real presence there. Well, as soon as we as soon as we make room for that, guess what? There may be other real presences.
Yeah.
God as a real presence, the demonic, that kind of thing. So, and that's what these folks are afraid of. Because now things are out of control. Getting back to this totalitarian way of thinking, it's all about control for these people. These people dress up their maniacal control freak nature in humanitarian speech, but they want total control. So their answer to every problem, if let's say they have a social program that doesn't work, instead of saying, "Oops, I guess we were wrong," what do they say? Well, we need more control next time. It's always more control, whether we're talking about pandemics or poverty or, racism. It's always more control. It's always more control. That's the answer every time.
Yeah, and that's dangerous too. No, I appreciate you having that conversation with me, because I know that can get a little strange sometimes. But I think that there needs to be more work, and there needs to be more functioning thought on this topic, because you're never, as Christian men and as Christian women, as just Christians in general, I guess, for this, right? You are never, okay, so like, let me just go back. You were talking about what your goal is, your intellectual goal. And I wrote it down, right? To retrieve Christian culture, or revive Christian culture. You can't do that just like functioning in the philosophical, right?
Right.
You have to do that functioning on the spiritual, or in the spiritual. And so when we talk about trying to remedy the meaning crisis, to make people, some thinkers have said, to make people re-enchanted again, to make people, again, I mentioned that John Vervaeke character. John Vervaeke says something along the lines of, he wants people to fall in love with reality again. Okay. And we need that. If that's our goal, though, that can't just be philosophical. We have to actually take a look at this meaning crisis and come to the real realization that, yeah, there might be something, there might be a spiritual, spiritual attacks might also be the reason for why so many people have been, to use a common phrase, black pilled, right? To be horribly nihilistic. And again, it would almost be easier if it was just a bunch of Emily Roses lying around, because then I could literally just go right across the street and call the Catholic priest and bada boom, right? That's not how absolutism works. But you know, I'm just being funny. But no,
No, I
when
know what you mean. Yeah.
it's more difficult now. When it's more subtle,
Yeah.
it's more difficult. And they're going,
Yeah, there's a great writer that was popular in the 80s and the early 90s named Scott Peck. Does that name ring a bell?
Scott Peck, yes. Someone, oh yeah, I'm I did this Advent program, and that's was one of the authors that was recommended to me by another guy who was doing the program with me. Scott Peck. Yeah, he wrote a book that, what was the book that he recommended? I don't know. You might tell me right now.
Well, the one that made him famous was The Road Less Traveled.
Okay.
And then the book that followed that book was a book exploring the nature of evil called People of the Lie.
That was it.
Yeah. So they were both really marvelous books to read. He's an interesting character. He was a Harvard-educated psychiatrist. I'm pretty sure it was psychiatrist. I don't think he was a psychologist. I think he was a psychiatrist. But anyway, when he started writing The Way Less Traveled, he knew that he was going to have to deal with the subject of love.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, I better read the New Testament. I mean, I'd give it a try. I mean, I know there's stuff about love in there.
Yeah.
By the time he got through the Gospels, he was a Christian.
Really?
Yeah, he started off as a Buddhist. And so he got to the end of the Gospels, and people asked him, he said, what was it that kind of brought you over? And he said, well, the people in the Gospels were so real. I could tell that this wasn't like mythology, or sort of like stylized hagiography. The people that I read about were people I saw on my couch every day at work. People who were confessing to him all their problems and troubles and stuff. So he said, look at Peter, up one second, down the next, yeah, got it. He's real. These are real people. But anyway, when he got to People of the Lie, that was kind of like the road too far for a lot of his audience, because he got into demonic possession, he got into these different things. And his definition of evil was one that stuck with me. He said this is his definition: militant ignorance. So when you unpack that, what does that imply? Well, it's paradoxical, because you're not militantly against something you don't know anything about.
Right.
So it's because you already know that you don't want to know.
Yeah.
And anything that reminds you of what you don't want to know and don't want to think about makes you angry and militant and fight. You want to fight against it.
Yes.
So it's a violent suppression of the truth, not just in the world, but in yourself. So think about it this way, I've gone, I've in terms of my weight, I've been up and down over the years, like most people. And but when I'm up, I don't want to think about it.
Right.
I just want to enjoy my food. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when I walk by like a mirror or something like that, I suck it in. I make sure I'm looking at myself from the right angle to make myself, I know what I'm doing.
Yes.
But that's what happens to us all the time. We know we've done something wrong. We don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
Somebody reminds us of it, makes us mad, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I'm going to look more into that. And that's such a militant ignorance as a way of as an explanation of what evil is. That's good. I want to talk more about this, but I also, and this is good. This is the beauty of an organic conversation. In my notes, I never had demonic possession written here once. But I'm curious to know your thoughts. We can use demonic possession still as a structure. Something that me and you have a shared interest in and a shared passion for. And obviously, you've never known this because, well, we just met, right? Is it seems that we're both trying to, or we have gearing our careers and our projects to help men regain, or I like that, remember masculine virtues, right? So I know that we talked off the air, when I become a clinician, I would particularly like to work with men's issues, working with men, working with with veterans, complex PTSD, things like that. So I wonder, again, why I say we'll use demonic possession as our framework. Men, and I don't know when, and because it's difficult because you can't put a start date on this. But yes, there's been a lot of masculine virtues that have been lost, obviously, and we have been possessed by a different type of spirit, and that different type of spirit has been not of true masculine virtue, but it's been of aloofness, it's been of bitterness, it's been of outright anger. So I want to kind of like gear this conversation now, discussing men's role in society, men's role in their family, men's virtues. What is a masculine virtue? Why have they been lost? How have they been lost? What are they in the first place? And so actually that's a good point. Then we'll keep on going from there. Let's talk about what are, in your opinion, the masculine virtues that we should hold?
Yeah, I think the virtues that often come to mind. I mean, and when we talk about these virtues, we're not saying that women can't possess them, but what we're saying is that there's a particular role that we as men play in our households and in our communities and so forth that has been the case historically in societies all over the world. And what's true about things that are generally true is that they're generally true. and you build societies on things that are generally true. Yeah. You don't try to create a society that is like built on exceptions or on outliers. When you come across those situations, you make exceptions. So, okay, in this particular case, this is highly unusual. We'll make an exception. But generally speaking, we need to raise our boys to be, virtuous in these ways, because it serves the interests of households and communities and so forth. So, a number of those things have to do with strength and with courage, and also the ability to endure pain, both physical and mental pain. Because the nature of the work that men historically have performed has required them to be able to do those things. And it's not just for their own benefit. That's kind of the modern spin on things. Everything is about kind of your own social sort of interest. That's why, everybody is mutually suspicious. Everybody is suspicious about everybody.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, anytime that even when I say something like what I just said, anytime somebody who's maybe on the radical left hears me say something like I just said, they'll immediately, he's just trying to preserve male privilege or something that. So,
and I know exactly what to say. What an idiot!
Right.
Yeah, it's always like, but if I can respond to it this way, it's almost like they have a script of how to.
Oh, they do. Yeah. They really do. But the way to kind of get around that script is just simply to say, let's think about institutions. Let's not think about you or me. Let's just think about our history. Are you really telling me that everybody in the past was an idiot? That everybody in the past was totally corrupt? That you're that much better than everybody else who's ever lived before? I mean, let's get real. So if we actually read the stuff that people wrote in the past, we discover that they knew a lot. In fact, many of the things they knew, we claim they don't or didn't, like the world is round. Actually, they did. They knew that. Like everybody knew that for like ever.
Right.
So, but people today, they congratulate themselves. We're in a sort of, basically, what does it mean to be a modern person? It means to congratulate yourself at the expense of dead people. That's what it means to be a modern person.
And it's poor epistemology. That's what it is. It's poor, it's sloppy, and it's lazy epistemology. The notion that you think that you just discovered this.
That's right. Right.
That's what you think knowledge is. That's your theory of knowledge. That you autonomously discovered this.
Right.
Or no. Or how about or that you came up with it? Like that's what I think. That's a better explanation. That you autonomously created this as if you and your wife created a child, right? That no. It's not like that at all. And it's well, that's part of the, going back to the meaning crisis. That's part of that's one aspect of the meaning crisis, is this poor epistemology, this poor idea of like of what knowledge is, of what truth is that when you take that up to a logical end, yeah, you're having a conversation of what truth is. And as you said, the modern person is just going to congratulate themselves because they think that they did it by themselves. And people don't even, my friends make fun of me, kind of lovingly, kind of not. Right, as all good friends do. But they go, Joe, you're just trying to be like this person and that person, or you're just regurgitating the thought of X, Y, and Z. And I go, well, first of all, I guess, well, who are you regurgitating the thought of? Because
right.
you think that you realize that none of your ideas, none of the ideas, unless you're a prophet or a genius, right? And those are real. We've had those in society before, and those are special people. Everyone else is just the circulating ideas that you have heard from other people, right? And it is actually kind of this beautiful thing, because it actually, when you look at it that way, it talks about the connectivity of human existence.
Yeah. Right.
But
yeah,
go on.
No, that's exactly right. I think, Jesus, he would talk about, sowing seed, or the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, or or another term would be leaven. Yes. And the idea is that this what he's expressing is, he says, you put a little bit of leaven in a lump of dough, and before you know, it's working its way all the way through. Mm-hmm. That's what happens with good ideas and bad ideas. Is that can happen. So I think that what we ought to do is we ought to give our ancestors credit for being human beings, and stop giving ourselves credit for being better than them. And if we can just do that, then I think we'll make some good progress, actually, paradoxically. And then I think when it comes to this matter of masculine virtue, we need to tie those virtues back to the institutions that they serve. And they still do in many ways. I mean, there are places where it's just so obvious that it almost, is a waste of time explaining. But we live in crazy times, and as Orwell said, when you live in crazy times like ours, the obligation is to say the obvious. So, like, I worked in the trades, and I was a framer. It's been a long time. I'm 60 years old now, but back when I was your age, I was doing that. And
you look like a framer.
What's that?
You look like a framer. I can see this. Yeah.
So anyway, but what you learn when you're in the trades is that, they're 98% men. I mean, let's just be honest. Yeah. I mean, they've been trying for years to get girls into the trades. I mean, if you want to get like a full ride to trade school, be a girl. They desperately want. And then what happens? The girls, they discover that it's a lot harder than they told her it would be, because she's competing not just for the praise of an instructor in a highly controlled environment, but for money in the open market.
Yeah.
And suddenly, the fact that you can't get that pile of lumber from here to there as quickly as that guy can means you're not worth as much.
Sure.
Or the fact that you can't raise up the building as quickly as that guy can means you're not worth as much. Right. So the girls are always at the bottom, and they're tired of being at the bottom, just like anybody would be if they found themselves in that spot. Like if I was on the Boston Red Sox, I'd be at the very end of the bench. I would never get an opportunity to hit, never get an opportunity to field. I just would not be physically prepared to compete.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's not that they're better people than me. Right. It's just that that's not where my gifts are.
Right.
So girls they just keep washing out and washing out and washing out and washing out. Why are we fighting against reality?
Yeah.
So does that mean guys are better as human beings? No, it just means that this particular task requires certain things. And by the way, the word virtus, means originally manliness. It's one of those things where we get the word virile. But yeah. The original sort of list of virtues was actually the qualities that made for a good warrior.
Sure.
So like courage, shrewdness, strength, these kinds of things. Then Plato and others had the idea, well, we can make lists for all sorts of things. We can make lists for good brickmaker, layer. We can make a list for a good housewife. And so what they did is they had all these lists. lists of virtues for every different occupation. Then somebody had the idea, and I think it was Socrates. He said, let's just make a list for what constitutes a good human being. And that's how we come to think about it now. The moral virtues are those things that, like honesty and just so forth, that we expect out of everybody. But there are still things that men tend to be better at, women tend to be better at, and that we ought to honor those people, those women, those men who are good at those things. So I just came away from, my sister did a lot of genealogical research on our family in the past, and it's just astonishing how many babies women had in the 18th century in the United States.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm like your average family is 10 kids. Your average family. There are women in my family line who had 20 kids.
Yeah.
I mean, generation after generation, just unbelievable.
I know. My grandmother, who's from Sicily, and they all came to this country. Yeah, one of 21.
Yeah, I know. My wife is half Sicilian, so her grandmother from Sicily, she was one of like 11, I think, something like that.
Absolutely wild, it's just absolutely wild. Like, almost like that. It's like a myth. Like, this can't be true.
That's right. That's right. I was looking at the numbers. I was like, over the course of 50 years, she had 23 kids.
No, it's phenomenal, and I like that you open that up, right? So, I am in full agreement with that. Is that, yeah, there does need, we need to stop. Well, there needs to be a greater admittance that yes, there are things that the natural order of this world allows men and women to do things better, right? Better at. And
yeah, there are things that my wife can do that I just can't do. Let me give you an example. So I'm a pastor. Obviously, my wife's a pastor's wife. When people see me come to the door, if they've never met me before, what do they think? What's he want? They're immediately on the defensive.
Yes.
My wife shows up. She's got that warm Latin sort of presence. She's 5'2", 5'3". Sure. They just open the door. She's holding a casserole. Next thing you know, she's on the couch with them talking about their grandchildren. They've never met her before.
Right. Yeah. No.
She can do that. I can't do that.
Right.
And it's a beautiful thing when you see how God has made the world and how he's distributed gifts. And there are certain gifts that tend to be, the case with men more than women and so forth. And like I said earlier, I mean, we shouldn't get so crazy about it that we don't make exceptions. But sure, we should also say these things are generally true.
Yeah. And
I think that generally speaking, men need to play to their strengths. Yeah. And those strengths tend to be along the lines I talked about earlier.
I've heard you discuss the virtues of piety, pietas, and gravitas before in relations with men, and these things are these are virtues that men should also hold dear in their hearts. The way I've explained what I think male virtue is just the notion of, this idea that you are in charge of your household. I mean, we can't. This is something that I do pick up from Peterson, and he is correct on this. Is that if you want your society to look a certain way, right? To be to just be better than it is, right? I mean, then you need to make it more localized and make it more localized. If you want, we need to change the United States. Well, okay. You need to change yourself and you need to change your house, right? And the man, I think, is obviously a vital key in that, along with the female. But again, there needs to be some, as we discussed, some blunt admittance that there are separate roles. And I think for the father needs to simply protect and provide for the household. And what does that look like? Well, I don't necessarily mean in the hunter-gatherer sense anymore that the father needs to, and we're luckily for us, right, we're not being attacked by barbarians anymore. So I don't necessarily need to go out into the field and kill a boar, bring it home, and then defend my family from the barbarians that are a barbarian impending invasion. I don't need to do that. Are you ordering your household in a way that makes sure that the good that you are, well, are you ordering your household, and are you dealing with your familial relations in a way that you are willing the good in them for unselfish reasons? And that's the way I look at masculinity, and the role of masculinity is willing the good. And the two functions in how the man wills the good of the household is to protect and to provide. And I don't care what that looks like. I mean, me and you, I'm sure, if I was 60 or you were 30, me and you, it looks like we have similar looks, right? But it doesn't necessarily, this is not the prototype. The machismo male is not the prototype, right? A skinny 115-pound man who is doing a greater job protecting, providing, willing the good in his family is more masculine than, right, the man who is 350 pounds and can bench press 415, right? So we need to recapture that. And part of that is this notion of piety and gravitas. I love, you once explained piety in a way that is not really explained or understood by by the modern approach or the modern understanding of piety. So I'm wondering, can you explain this ancient form of piety that you've discussed before?
Yeah, it's something that has a very masculine character. And I know that today when people hear the word piety, if they even know what it means, they associate it with old women, maybe, holding their rosaries and things like that. So I think what we need to do is go back to the classical world and see the original word and appreciate it. It's pious. And the figure in antiquity who is said to best exemplify it was Aeneas.
Yes.
So Aeneas was the hero of Troy, and he's
the root of my people, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Italians, technically.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
In fact, the funny thing is that for years people thought Troy was like a mythological thing. Then they actually discovered the place.
Yeah, right.
They found the ruins. I believe that there is a direct connection genetically between Rome and Turkey, and it was actually, it kind of demonstrated that maybe there's more to this Aeneas story.
Yes, that's right.
So anyway, but Aeneas, as you know, was on the losing side of that conflict. Odysseus and Achilles and those guys win, and through the sly, underhanded tactics of Odysseus, that's kind of
right.
So anyway, when the city is like collapsing and being burnt all around, Aeneas is trying to defend it, and as he's defending it, he's told by his mother, he's a demigod like Achilles,
right?
And his mother is Venus, which I always think, what would it be like to have mom, Venus as your mother, But anyway, it'd be like a mixture between Sophia Loren and, I don't know. But anyway, so she tells him to go home and save his family.
Yeah.
His father is a cripple. I guess that's what happens when you have relations with Venus. We just completely wipe you out, man. So anyway, so his father's a cripple, can't walk. His wife is there and his son is there. And his father is an old stubborn guy. He just I'm not leaving. I'm going down with the city.
Going down with the ship.
That's right. And so Aeneas said, I can't leave my father. I got to defend him to the death, And at that moment, his wife says, well, what about your son? And he's like torn, between his father and his son, his father and his son. And then there's a sign that appears over his son Ilius, his head of a ring of fire, a crown of fire. And then there's his father sees that and says, ooh, this might mean there's a future for us. And then he asks for a sign in the heavens from Jupiter, and that's when they see they see a meteor, they see a shooting star, and he says, okay, that's it, we're gone. Okay. And so at that point, Aeneas takes his father and puts him on his back. So this is the picture. His father is on his back, his son is in one hand, and his sword is in the other.
Mm.
And to the Roman people, that was the picture of male piety.
Yeah, it's this notion of, well, it's a notion of duty. It's a notion of paying debt, not like monetary, but I'm indebted to my father for all that he has done to me. That's a beautiful notion of piety.
Yeah, and my son has a claim on me too. I have been given the charge of protecting him and
Yes.
making sure that he carries forward the family line. And
That's
that's exactly it. So piety in antiquity was honoring your benefactors.
Correct.
And
Yes.
caring for those who depended on you. So that would mean obviously your parents first, but it would mean the city fathers. It would mean the honoring the dead, the heroes of your people, and of course the divinities, God.
Right.
So that was the whole framework. And if we can get back to that understanding of male piety, I think we'll see a huge revival of interest in the things related to God among men.
And you see how, so no man in my world, I'm sure in your world, and well, because you just explained it, when you think of piety, I think of my nanny saying a rosary, oh, look at that pious woman. No, but this remembering of piety is important. And you do see this being lived out, but just in a more like trickled down way, I guess. And here's a great example. Many fathers do this, my father especially. We ate dinner together every night as a family around the table. And as these things, as when these things take place, right? Obviously, you're having free-flowing conversation, and people are taking their turns to talk. Or in my family, we're Italian, we're just talking. And so
it's like my wife's family.
Yeah, there it is. And so, you're in these conversations, and then someone, and it was usually in my family, between my siblings, it was me who said the thing that was a little too much of a smart-ass comment to mom, right? And
I know what's coming. Your dad's about to act.
And my dad acts, and he says, he points that finger and he goes, "What the hell did you say?" He snaps right back. I remember the times that my dad and I love my father, and I partially, I think this is why we have a good relationship. The times that I can look back to that he really got on mine and my brother's ass. And I'm even talking the times that, sometimes it was, I remember my older brother made my mom very upset at one point for something, and it was something very nasty. And my dad took my brother and shoved him up against the wall.
Yeah.
And he goes, "If you ever talk to your mother that way, I swear to God." Well, and I think the swear to God is, but that's piety, because what is he trying to instill? Pay your debts. You need to honor this woman who has given birth to you, right? That's piety. Realizing that there, again, going back to the cosmological structure, that there are things that you need to look up to, and that you need to honor the things that you need to look up to. You need to have appropriate awareness. And fathers who do that, that's an expression of piety. And that's going even back to the very start of this conversation. You see all of these Western grand narratives, all of these Western virtues, along with God being blown up. And when you sense the father, taking me in the collar and shoved me against the wall and said, "Damn it, Joe, I swear to God, if you do this again," that's finding a piece of these beautiful things that have been lost. And through piety, that other masculine virtue flows, gravitas. When your father is picking you up and shoving you against the wall, as my dad did, right? I'm not trying to paint a picture like my dad kicked my ass or anything like that. My dad definitely disciplined us when we need to be disciplined. And you realize that there's something, a spirit possesses you, and you realize that, okay, this is important. My father is now, he's not just, he's almost transcended he's almost like physically, he's not necessarily just physical anymore, right? I sense his spirit, and I sense his soul, and I sense his duty. And so that's gravitas, right? That there's something bigger than him that is possessing him. That's that's good and that's true. And then you realize that as well. And so you have to, as a man, you have to live out gravitas. You have to live out and have people witness that you are bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah, that's huge. If you know, one of the problems we have in the world today is people don't, because they don't know that there is something bigger than themselves, right? They assume that anytime that somebody does what your father did, it's an ego trip, that it's just serving his own sort of need for like being important or whatever. But as you know, it was actually serving a much higher purpose. It really wasn't about him. It was about what's right.
Yes.
You know, honoring your mother is right, and you're going to do it so long as I'm around, and that kind of thing. And gravitas, that's another great word that we owe to, you know, Italian and to Latin. It means weight. It's where we get the word gravity. So somebody who has gravitas has substance, he has weight. You can't take them lightly. It's somebody you can't take lightly.
Correct.
So what you want as a man is you want to be taken seriously. I don't know of I've never met a guy who didn't want to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
You know, now there are times to lighten up and enjoy yourself, you know, and just, you know, don't be so serious. But there are other times where you're like, man, you don't disrespect me. You know, that's what the whole sort of hip hop culture is all about, as far as I can see from as an outsider.
Explain that more.
Yeah, it's like, you know, maybe I'm in a bad neighborhood. Maybe, you know, I don't have the education that maybe other people have, but you're not going to take me lightly. You know, you need to take me seriously. And I think there's something admirable about that. I think every man should aspire to be taken seriously.
Sure.
And when you have to be taken seriously, it's not a gift. It's something something that you can command. Like, it's not like you stand there and say, "Take me seriously." That's somebody you take lightly. A person who has to resort to that kind of thing. It's just the way you know, your deportment, you know, the things you give yourself to. But you noted, and I think this is really important, if you serve the truth, and everybody knows you do, and you're willing to take heat for it, you're willing to suffer for it, you're willing to, you know, work for it, then no one can take you lightly. You know, even if they don't agree with you, even if they don't want to be around you, they can't take you lightly.
And I think about, so for a while I discredited and I didn't believe in this notion of toxic masculinity. I thought toxic masculinity was just kind of like another scripty like thing that radical leftists use to really just break the grand narrative of masculine virtue. But when you break that down, right, toxic masculinity, there is something to that. And I do think toxic masculinity is the attempt to live out masculine virtue, but it's the miscalculation of living that out, right? So I think we just talked about gravitas. You want to be, so you want people to realize that almost like I said, you want people to be able to sense your soul, to sense your spirit, something bigger than you. You want to be bigger. And I think of how many men, they realize that's true. They see that pattern in reality, that men are supposed to be, that when you look at a man, that he should be bigger, that you should sense his spirit, that you should sense that this man is advocating for the truth. But again, that's miscalculated. And then you think about the whole explosion of weightlifting, right? And I weightlift. I think that there's something important to men looking physically buff. I think that there's actually a very true masculine. There's a masculine ethic of that. But when you're just spending, when your God becomes gym life, when you are just trying to get gravitas by being physically bigger than everyone else, right? When your muscle mass is just physically bigger, well, then that could be a form of toxic masculinity, because you are conflating gravitas from its spiritual significance, and you're only thinking that it has a physical significance. And so I think that again, to like reframe toxic masculinity, I do think that it's the miscalculation of these truths that we inherently intuit, but we just miscalculate because, well, why? Because going back to another part of the conversation is because we just, our epistemology is flawed, right? We think that we are the bearers of the truth and that we shouldn't look back to the old books. We shouldn't look back to the old structures of the hero. We shouldn't go back to the gospels. That's a mistake. And that's how you get these more toxic forms. Yesterday I was having a conversation, like I said, and one thing that Cale Zeldin brought up is that in just to borrow from Joseph Campbell, right? In his hero's journey, there's a point where you need to sit in hell and you need to go down there. And Christ does it, right? You need to go down there and you don't need to just go and visit, right? You need to actually maybe have a little vacation down in hell. And that's very difficult. And I think that the modern man doesn't want to sit in hell. They're not good. Again, I being a student of psychology and a student of counseling, you realize that that is a big problem for the individual is stay with your emotion. There's this therapy spearheaded mostly by Fritz Perls, Gestalt therapy. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all.
Vaguely, not
yeah, well,
real.
a tenet of Gestalt is sitting with the emotion, right? But today, though, I think the modern man, when a negative emotion is felt, they don't want to sit in hell. They want to just, let's just forget about it. Let's move on. You mentioned this before, I think.
Yeah.
Let's box this up. We'll throw it away. We're not going to sit in hell. When you don't sit in hell, when you don't sit with a negative emotion, well, then that's how these toxic miscalculations occur. Because there's no contemplation or meditation of why you're in hell. And you're not actually able to live out with that, though, you're not able to live the hero's journey. What you're doing is now you have found an avenue, and the avenue just makes you deeper into hell. It doesn't allow you to go out.
It's kind of like a virtual kind of heroism that you get into. Yeah, I think you're right. Obviously, virtual with the world that we live today with video games, but also just like kind of looking the part but not being the part.
Yeah.
Like if you look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, then everybody assumes that maybe that you really are the hero.
Yeah, and that you have your shit together, essentially, for lack of a better term.
No, I think that's right. Yeah, I can't remember where I read this years ago. Maybe it was in Robert Bly, but there was something that was fairly common in Norse culture that actually sounds a lot like what you're describing, where a young man would actually go and sit in the ashes of the longhouse, where you'd have the big, and he would just like be there for days.
Yeah.
Just getting dirtier and sootier.
Yeah.
And everybody knew, okay, I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was sort of like something that a young man would do, and then he would just, then finally he would be done, and then he would be ready to move on or something, But it sounds like what you just described. I think that's good.
Yeah, and it's just sad that we're unable to do this, and it's hard, and it takes mentors to help you sit in hell, and it takes a particular amount of discipline to sit in hell. But yeah, no, the inability of sitting in hell is I think one reason why.
Well, I think this actually relates to something earlier I just mentioned when we were talking about masculine virtues, and that's the ability to endure pain.
Yeah.
So psychic pain is even more difficult to sort of steel yourself against than physical pain in certain situations. So you need to be, if you're going to do the right thing, that's the thing. If you're going to do the right thing, you're going to experience pain. And so you've got to be able to build your ability to endure pain up.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to take the cheap way out every time.
Nietzsche says that pain and suffering is the only way out of mediocrity. And I don't know anyone who ever wants to be mediocre. You said, have you ever met a man who doesn't want to be taken seriously? Have you ever met a person who just wants to be mediocre?
That's right.
That's right.
What do you aspire? Yeah, what do you aspire to be? What do you aspire to be? Whatever.
Just beige. That's right. I like Robert Bly. You mentioned him earlier, and Robert Bly is he kind of helped usher in, along with Warren Farrell and other gentlemen like that. And there's some of the philosophical talking heads around the modern men's movement. The one reason why I ultimately reject the men's movement, I don't reject the work of Bly, and I don't reject the work of Fairlight. I actually keep those two thinkers dear to my heart, and I think they're very important. Ultimately, why I do reject the modern men's movement is because I think that you don't see what we just talked about, the ability to sit in hell, the ability to bear the cross. I think that that particular movement, and that's why I like to differentiate, who I am compared to a modern men's movement, is because, yeah, I sense it as they're more upset that the cross is bared and they believe that it's a plight, but they don't realize that, no, being part of a man is enduring suffering, and you have to. And I think one critique I have of that is that, yeah, the modern men's movement just doesn't even want to sit in hell. They want to just find the avenue, and it unfortunately leads them deeper into hell. They don't want to bear the cross. And for men, it's like, Paul Simon has this really great line in Obvious Child, and he says, the cross is in the ballpark. And I've always contemplated and meditated on what that means. I love Paul Simon. I think I enjoy him. I think that he's a greater songwriter than Bob Dylan. That's a hot take, but I really do. And so, yeah, he says this line, and he says, the cross is in the ballpark. I go, what the hell does that mean? And so when you say something's in the ballpark, it's feasible, right? It's doable. The cross. And then obviously I think about, okay, well, what's the cross then? Well, the idea to take up your cross, to bear your cross. And so I think what Paul Simon is saying is that yeah, you do have this cross to bear. You do have this suffering to bear. And although it might not look manageable, although it might be specifically painful, either psychically or physically, it's in the ballpark and you can do it. And I think that's something that's a mantra that I say to myself from time to time, is that the cross is in the ballpark when I'm trying to reframe and recalculate and re-enchant my own masculinity. Is that part of it is, yes, I'm supposed to suffer, and I'm supposed to bear pain, but guess what? It's in the ballpark and you can get it done. And I think more men need to realize that. One thing that I do want to touch on, and we could try to end, I don't know where you are at in time.
Yeah, I'm starting to run out, but let's go for it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And this is a great ending question that I have for you is, so we just got done talking about toxic masculinity versus masculinity. And for me, reading your book, In the House of Tom Bombadil, I see Tom to be the proper prototype of masculine virtue, and Sauron as the proper prototype of toxic masculinity. So I'm just curious to kind of begin our descent. Do you think what's the purpose of reading the old books? What's the purpose of how can reading the great works of literature, how can looking at characters like Tom Bombadil help men recapture and reframe and re-enchant their masculinity?
Oh, I think that can serve a great, they can serve us really well. I think, for one thing, C.S. Lewis said that it's really important to read old books, not because the people in the past were right about everything. It's just that they were wrong about the things that let me put it this way. They were right about things that we're wrong about, even like we're right about some things they were wrong about. So in other words, so when you read stuff that was written in a different period of time, it's reacting to or addressing things that help you to see your own sort of situation a little better.
Yeah.
And so I think when you read those old books, there's, for example, no need to sort of apologize for masculine virtue like you see today. It's almost like, oh, I'm so sorry that I'm a man,
Right.
kind of thing today. But then they didn't have any of that. And so then what you can do is when you read something that maybe might strike you as completely difficult to maybe accept at first, it forces you to think, well, what would a world be like in which this was like just sort of common sense? Like one of the books that was really helpful for me years ago was Oikonomikos, which was like a handbook for household management. It was written for men.
Okay.
And it was like a bestseller in antiquity. I mean, Cicero translated it from the Greek into Latin. I mean, it was just really a big deal. So if they had Barnes and Noble in those days, it would be like Rich Dad Poor Dad, or
Sure.
Millionaire Next
Sure.
Door. It was just like that. And in that, there's this it's Socrates. So Plato wrote about Socrates, but so did Xenophon. So this is Xenophon.
Yeah.
And Xenophon describes Socrates as like he wants to know what makes households work. So he talks to one guy who's just a complete moron, doesn't know how to run his household, is going nowhere. And then he talks to another guy who's like got his act together, really good. And there are all sorts of things that this guy says, just like, that today you're like, what? And then you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So for example, thinking about households in antiquity, he said, men are for outside work, women are for inside work. And then you're like, I mean, how sexist is that? Right. But what he's getting at is he's saying, then he explains it. He said, well, there's something about men's bodies. They stay warmer in cold weather. I don't know if you've noticed this, but
Sure.
Your wife is probably like wearing a blanket all the time.
That is actually very true. That is very
My
true.
wife is the same way. We've got better heaters.
Yeah.
This, by the way, this is one of my theories. This is God's like inside joke, but also a way to make sure that we fill the earth with his image. And that is, we have all these cold women in the wintertime and all these warm men, and they just kind of cuddle up to us. And one thing leads to another.
That's beautiful. And then, and that's how a fruitful world happens.
That's right. But anyway, but what you have is you have these statements that you're initially like, man, that would get you like canceled today.
Sure.
But then you're like, what? But hold on, maybe there's something true to this. Maybe this actually makes sense in a certain way. Let me stop and think about this. And the next thing you know, you're like, wow, it makes, if I lived in that time, I'd be like, yeah, in fact, maybe it's still true.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And that's not an actualized thought that occurs. We see things, I think, today, and we are just kind of ethically ethically surprised. How could you say that? And then we just leave it at that, right? We never really investigate what the truth is about the statement that we just read. We just kind of get offended and we get scared because, well, anything that is moderately or mildly even offensive today, we run away from. But again, going back to that point, you need to sit through hell a little bit. I really appreciate you talking to me, and really today, this whole conversation, it reminds me of the importance of the 20th century theologian Karl Barth. I think Barth's a Protestant, actually. And he has this idea, and I forget exactly in which book it is, but he talks about this notion of mimesis a lot. Mimesis that we need to continue to remember. And the moment that our mimesis ends is the moment that we become further and further away from God's providence. And so this conversation made me think a lot about made me think of the importance of remembering and the importance of mimesis. So I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, this was a great conversation. I would love to have more ones with you in the future.
Well, I appreciate that, Joe. Thanks a lot. Well, hopefully I'll have this book on totalitarianism coming out. And after that comes out, I'll probably be looking for people to talk to me.
Hey, I would love to have you on. When's that book supposed to be? When's that slated to come out?
Well, not until probably the fall.
Okay, that sounds great. So you're still in the writing process currently?
Yeah, torturously so.
Well, hey, I can't wait to read it. So thank you again for coming on. And viewers, thank you so much for watching. I probably will have a little break for the holidays, but next week I should be busting out some videos. So please stay tuned. Bye now.